How's it going, people? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to a video on 10 cheap project cars that you can buy for under £5,000. If you follow the channel for some time, you know I've got two main project cars, a Mazda MX-5 and a VW Polo 9N, and both of them were very cheap to buy and have been generally cheap to work on and turn into my own little projects. So I thought I would make a video on 10 more cars that you guys could buy to start off your project car journey. Don't forget that I'm in the UK, so prices in other countries may differ, and don't forget that whenever you buy any second-hand car, maintenance, repairs, insurance, road tax, all that good stuff is important to remember. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit the like button. I would really appreciate it. 2,000 likes, I'll do the same video again, but under £2,000 instead. And subscribe as well if you're new. Without further ado, let's get into the video. I mentioned it in the intro, but I couldn't make this video in good conscience without mentioning the first generation Mazda MX-5, which comes as either a 1.6 litre or 1.8 litre inline 4, that makes 131 brake horsepower in 1.8 spec, which will get it to 60 in a relatively sedate time of 8.3 seconds. But you don't buy the Mark I MX-5 for its speed, you buy it for its handling, and those sweet pop-up headlights as well, let's be real. Plus the fact that it offers a perfect platform for all kinds of modifications, irrespective of which kind of route you want to go down. These work well as track cars, and without even going for forced induction, you can really make something that handles exceptionally well with some anti-roll bars, poly bushes, and decent suspension, which will altogether run you less than £1,500. But these are also super easy to get more power out of, with supercharging, turbocharging, and individual throttle body kits all being easy to get a hold of, although relatively expensive. I went for the supercharging route, but it's whatever takes your fancy. You can spend as much or as little as you want on these. Check the OMG Miata build for an ultra expensive one, and check out my early videos on my MX-5 for a cheaper example. The main thing is that the aftermarket is huge for these, so plenty of choice, and they're relatively simple to work on. They start at around £3,000, and for £5,000 you'll be looking at a 1997 model with around 100k on the clock. Watch out for rust on these, particularly around the inner and outer sills, as that can be the end of these stunning little cars. Next up we have a car I almost rescued from a bush a couple of years ago, the Porsche 944, which is a 2.5 litre inline 4 engine, making 161 brake horsepower, which gets it to 60 in 8 seconds. I really just wanted to get a proper classic car onto this list, and I think the 944 offers two main routes for modifications. On the one hand, they make great track cars and have their own race series in many countries around the world, and on the other hand, there are still many of these in disrepair which deserve proper restoration projects. And that could be either resto modding or just simply restoring to their former glory. Like the MX-5, they've been going up in value recently, and not just because of the used car price bubble, so it would be good to get in there sooner and start your project Porsche before they become unaffordable. I personally think it has a great boxy shape, which is consistent with the 80s car design that we know and love, and will continue to look better and better with age. These are listed for a minimum of around £5,000 on Auto Trader, although you can get them cheaper on eBay, but either way these will need some restorative work. There are many known issues with these as they are so old, and it's all well documented. Regular oil changes are key, and head gasket failure isn't uncommon, plus over time there have been many cracks appearing in the dashboards from the sun. Next up we have the Mark VI Ford Fiesta ST, which is a 2 litre inline 4 engine which makes 147 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 7.9 seconds, not bad for a little warm hatch. This is known as the ST150 in reference to the PS, and like the MX-5, although maybe to a slightly lesser extent, it has a wealth of modification options available from many aftermarket suppliers. You can go down the mad, over-the-top tuner route if you're that way inclined, and it also is a pretty punchy track car with a few small modifications, so people that go all in and spend more cash can end up building something very capable. I would look at the KW or BC racing suspension in particular, depending on what your budget is. There is also a relatively cheap turbo kit for it which uses the TD04, but I would warn that the engine doesn't like to see much over 245 brake horsepower without forging, according to some owners and suppliers I could find. These start at under £2,000, you'll get a decent 2007 model with around 65,000 miles on the clock for £5,000. Watch out for timing chain tensioners and a dirty throttle body. The key weak point on these is the gearbox, which is also why you can't throw too much power at them stock. In the hot hatch world, there aren't many names as important as Golf GTI, and the Mark V offers a really cool platform for a project car with its 2 litre turbocharged inline 4, which makes 197 brake horsepower and will get to 60 in 7 seconds. The key benefit of one of these is that it comes turbocharged, and it's ready to get more power depending on your budget. The Stage 3 Revo system that's available for it, for example, will get the the car to just under 350 brake horsepower and 470 Nm of torque, which is more than enough in a car like this, so you can go cheaper and find the 300 brake horsepower mark without breaking the bank. These are also very popular cars for car shows with plenty of bagged examples, and they do have a solid aftermarket. I personally think these benefit from a nice clean look with some aggressive alloys and maybe a few trick bits like a central exit exhaust. £3,000 the minimum that I could find these listed for, and for £5,000 you'll be looking at a 2007 model still with relatively high miles. Coil packs, water pump, timing belt and positive crankcase ventilation are the main pain areas on these, and make sure to test all the gear changes if you go for an automatic, as DSGs do require some preventative maintenance. It gets a lot of flack on the internet, but the Corsa VXR offers a good little hot hatch for you to mess around with thanks to its 1.6 litre turbocharged inline 4, which makes 189 brake horsepower, and it will get to 60 in 6.8 seconds. If you're willing to spend a few additional Ks on performance, there are kits that will get over 330 brake horsepower out of these, but it does sadly require forging and a few other upgrades to keep the reliability. The most insane and expensive builds on these have gone to over 400 brake horsepower, which is nuts. I actually think it does look very decent standard with that aggressive body kit and alloys, but someone with a good eye can make these look even more savage. One thing I'd say though is that it's almost too easy to ruin these. You need to have a good vision up front to make these look better than they did when they were stock. I think skirts, some track focused alloys and some coilovers do bits on these personally. £3,000 the minimum that you'll find these listed for, and for £5,000 you'll get a 2010 model with 60k on the clock. They aren't known for reliability though, and many have been harassed by previous owners, so finding one in good condition may be tough. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. As I said, if I get 2,000 likes in this video, I'll do it under £2,000. And please hit the subscribe button. We're getting very close to 100k subs now, and it's literally around the corner. The Renault Clio RS 197 is another great project car, but I would specifically recommend it to anyone looking to build a cheap track car. It has a 2 litre inline 4 engine which makes 197 brake horsepower and will manage 0 to 60 in 6.7 seconds. It comes with a nice close ratio gearbox and aggressive styling from the get-go, and it's also got brake ducts for brake cooling, which is a pretty cool feature to have from standard. Get a splitter on it to make the most out of the Venturi tunnel and some lighter alloys, some bucket seats and a roll bar with deleted rear seats and a harness seat belt, as well as some track brake pads and fresh rubber, and you've got a car you'll be proud of on track days already. Throw in the suspension, anti-roll bars and poly bushes as the next step, and you've practically got a Clio Cup car. These start at around £3,000, and for 5k you'll get a 2008 model with around 70,000 miles on the clock. Gearboxes are the main problem with these, with synchros going between 3rd and 4th gear, which requires a whole new gearbox. For that reason, if you don't want to spend loads of money on an upgraded box, I wouldn't go for engine mods, as I wouldn't want to push my luck. The E46 BMW has forever been a great platform for modifying and makes a great project car for many different types of car lovers. The 330 Ci has a 3 litre inline 6 engine which puts out 227 brake horsepower and will get to 60 in 6.7 seconds. There are so many ways to modify an E46, it's insane. From a simple restoration to former glory, to a show car with bags and a Pandem wide body kit, to a clean look with uprated coilies and alloys, to a stripped out track car like the many you'll see bumming it around the Nürburgring. It's another car with a massive aftermarket and a few specialists around the UK who can both advise on the best parts and do the work on your behalf if you're not that hands-on. I would recommend giving it a go yourself though, as buying a cheap 330 Ci you'll learn a whole bunch of new skills with tools which will only be a positive in the long term. They start at around £2,500, and for £5,000 you get a 2005 model with around 80,000 miles on the clock. Reliability is sketchy on these though, with plenty of problems documented on E46 owners forums. So if you're buying one as a project car, you'll want to check in particular for leaks and give it a good test drive. It's one of the reasons why many people buy these and strip them to become track cars, as it's easy to rag the engines into the ground. Next up is the Nissan Skyline 350 GT, which obviously has an exceptional name and shares its platform with the 350Z. It has a 3.5 litre V6 as well, which puts out 276 brake horsepower and will do 0 to 60 in 6.7 seconds. If you've got a good bit of cash, a workshop, a lot of patience and some skill, you could go as far as getting the Vader kit for the car, which is the car the Joker drives in Suicide Squad. It's basically a full body and interior kit that turns a car from a relatively unassuming Nissan into what looks like an ultra exotic supercar. But outside of that, this car still looks great with clean vibes, and my favourite 350 GT builds all keep it relatively simple, but that's just my opinion. I have also seen some mad builds with massive rear spoilers and time attack splitters. These start at around £4,000, and for 5k you'll get a 2006 example with around 60,000 miles on it. They're considered to be pretty reliable, but excessive oil use, synchro issues and some build quality problems on the interior are known. There was also a recall for overheating issues, but ideally this would have been sorted by now. Just missing out on the top spot, we have the EP3 Honda Civic Type R, which is a 2-litre inline-4 engine, making 197 brake horsepower, and it will do 0 to 60 in 6.4 seconds. One of the key reasons why this makes a great project car is that K20 engine block, which can be tuned to ridiculous levels of performance, especially with some forced induction. But even without, the VTEC makes this car incredibly fun to run on the red line, and it's got plenty of other modification opportunities that make it a great project car. One option would be to go for JDM OEM vibes and buy all the Mugen parts for it, which would be pretty cool. But in general, most people are able to make something pretty cool out of these, and it looks good with all sorts of mods, kind of like the opposite of the Corsa VXR I mentioned before. I personally particularly liked Jesse Collingham's EP3 for example, which was a properly nice looking car. These start at around £3,000 at the bottom end, and for £5,000 you'll be looking at a 2004 model with 80,000 miles on it. The cam chain needs to be replaced on time, and feel for issues in changing gears, as the synchros are known to go if the gearbox has been harassed. The K20 block is known to be very strong on these though, which is a huge positive. Taking the top spot we have the Audi S3, which a friend of mine literally tuned into a 400 brake horsepower weapon a few years ago. Stock it has the hallowed BAM 1.8 litre turbocharged inline-4 engine, which makes 221 brake horsepower and will do 0 to 60 in 6.4 seconds. It's also the only all-wheel drive car on this list. That 1.8T block has been modified, played with, blown up, rebuilt, all sorts of other stuff over its lifespan, and plenty of tuning houses offer kits to get more power out of it if you fancy. A Haldex controller will also let you use all-wheel drive at all times, rather than when the car thinks it's required, which is a useful and reasonably cheap mod. There are also plenty of aesthetic mods for these, and I particularly like the nice big exposed intercoolers, as it looks properly savage on these. VW Group cars also generally just look good with a clean look, but some people do go mad with these, so it's all personal preference. These start at around £3,500, and for £5,000 you'll be looking at pretty high mileage out of a 2003 example. As always with VW Group cars, coil packs are a known issue, as are fouling spark plugs, but outside of that and a few oil leaks, it's not a bad engine, and it's also super cheap to buy a new used block off of eBay. So I do hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. If you did, as I said, do hit the like button, it's much appreciated, and comment down below to me your thoughts on these 10 project cars. Massive thanks to the patrons as always for their support, and to you guys as well for watching. I'll see you in the next one.